Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes video. Over the past year, I've been collecting various washes for miniatures to use in part for some terrain, but also to use for some of the miniatures that I shoot some of the terrain with and some of my photographs, and of course for some of my personal play. And as I've been collecting them, I've been discovering that each one has its own unique properties and a different kinds of effect. But once I collected a recent one, which is Vallejo's new wash, I immediately thought, oh, this is the perfect one, and I wanted to do a review of it and compare it to the other washes that I have. And once I set these up, I realized that each wash produces a pretty unique effect, and maybe the wash that's right for you is based on the type of effect you're looking for, your budget, and and personal preference for appearance, that sort of idea. So what I've done today is I decided to give you an overview of 4 washes that I have, which represent some of the most popular ones on the market, maybe 1 or 2 that you haven't been aware of. And I've I've painted on to a piece of sprue that I've painted equal amounts. I've tried to keep it as equal as possible, the different products, so we could see them side by side for comparison, so you could see exactly how much pigment is in them, and try to get a sense of how much shading they produce. And then I'd also like to give you a little sense of some of the value that some of them offer. Let's take a closer look at the sprues, discuss a little bit about the products, and show you some of the effects that I achieved with them. So by way of introduction to the various products here, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of them. The first one here is probably the industry standard. This is a GW wash, or part of their Citadel paint line. And the colors I've chosen for all of these are as close to black as I could get. So this is Bedaub Black, and GW is known for their paint quality. They're one of the higher in the market. Of course, there's some dispute depending on the painter of which preference they have, but GW washes really set a new standard for the ways that you could quickly get color onto miniatures, and so obviously had to be included as the one that I've been using the most for the longest period of time. I was on the War Store a little ways back, and if you haven't visited the War Store, it's a discount online store for miniature supplies, painting, all sorts of stuff. It's a good place to check it out. And I saw a product that I hadn't seen before. It's called Wonder Wash. It's produced by Wonder Wash Inks, and Wonder Wash Inks produce a whole shade of colors in that are supposed to, as they say here, paint on shadows in seconds. So I picked one up just to try it out. I haven't been using it a lot, and I'll show you why when I do a close-up of it in a second. The third one here is, the pot was a little open in the box, so it actually got a little stained here, but this is Vallejo's new shade. It's new, at least to me. I think it's relatively new on the market. Vallejo's wash system comes in 2 colors, I think, at the moment, a sienna, and this is their black wash. And obviously, you can see it's sold in a much larger volume, and we'll talk about pricing in a little bit. But once I saw this, and I think I'd seen another review of it online by somebody else, I decided I had to go for it and try it out. Lastly is a product most of you are also probably familiar with. This is Army Painter's Quick Shade. I selected the dark tone for this test, as it was the darkest tone they make, which would be best comparison to black in general. The only difference between the Army Painter, well, I should say, one of the key differences between the Army Painter and the other 3 washes is that these are all water-based, and the Army Painter is a urethane-based shading system, so you have to use, say, like mineral spirits to remove it. And they sell it as part of their entire, line that it is designed for quickly painting miniatures using base sprays, shading, and then an anti-shine coat that you can spray on it to dull it down. So I'm hoping in this camera angle, I'm going to do a close-up of each of these sprues. What I've done, anyway, that I hope it carries the colors and the glossy matte contrast of the different ones, because they really do vary quite a bit. But what I did is I recently built a bunch of mantic ghouls, and I had some sprues extra from it, and I thought I would use the sprues as a test model, so that because it has lots of contours in it and nubs and places where the wash can recess, it would at least give you an idea of how it's going to finish on a model, rather than just putting it on, say something flat that's not going to have enough contour to pick out what shades are supposed to do, which is get into those cracks and crevices and really darken them up. All of the sprues have been painted with a satin spray paint. The spray paint is Rust-Oleum's Fossil color, I believe, which I was using to base coat my my ghouls. And so I decided that because it has a satin finish, you know, I don't know how that compares to regular acrylic paint, so that could affect the test. But I didn't want to go back and, you know, I didn't want to hand paint all of these sprues with one of my GW or you know, model game colors to try to do it the most accurately. I'm just trying to get this out quick. So let's take a look at each of the sprues and take a good look at the effect that was produced. All of them, before I do that, all of them I brushed on the material rather than actually dipping it. A few of them I did shake off some of the excess. The quick shade, it's recommended that you shake your models after you dip them in the can. You're supposed to whip them out, you know, really aggressively, but it does say you can paint it on. So what I did is I painted on fairly liberally for all of these, and then I tried to brush it off to give as even a coat as I could. I had a little trouble with the Vallejo, I'm going to show you in a second, but overall I made as a reasonable effort to try to paint them in a uniform way with the washes. So taking a look at the GW wash line, their Citadel paint line, let's get that a little bit more in frame. What I did is I painted from the bottom half of each of these sprues with the wash, and the GW wash, if you take a, let's see if I can get, there we go, nice focus up close. It produces a fairly uniform, you know, muting of the overall color as compared to the top, you know, which was unwashed, and pools in the recesses, but has what I would consider, looking at all of these washes, one of the more mild effects compared to the rest. And I think you'll see that difference in a minute. All of the sprues were hung vertically to dry so that the wash would collect, you know, in the lower areas, and any areas I saw it was heavily pooled, I tried to pick it out as I would if I were actually washing my miniatures where I didn't want detail to be completely obscured. Taking a look at it, one thing I noticed that was kind of interesting, and it's probably an exaggeration due to the large size of the bend, which is not that, you know, that of course miniatures in their hair and folds of their clothing are going to have much smaller creases than something like a large L here, but you can see that the GW wash pooled and then kind of recessed away from the middle and formed almost like a coffee stain effect here in the corner. That surprised me a little bit, as I tend to think of the GW washes as not really having that kind of a problem. And that's not something I typically see on a miniature, but it was interesting to note on the sprue how that effect finished and it dried. One thing to keep a note on is that in the satin finish, the GW wash seemed to pull away a little bit from the edges as it was drying, and that's left a bit of a ring of clear around it. Again, this is probably exaggerated compared to a miniature, but it is a unique effect that I didn't see on the others, and so I wanted to point it out to you here in this one. And then you can see where it's pooled on the bottom. I didn't quite paint this bottom evenly, but you can see how it's darkened there. So that's the GW wash. Taking a look at the Wonder Wash, the Wonder Wash Black, and I think right there you can see it, the Wonder Wash Black finishes with a highly, I would say, a medium to high gloss finish. So if you're going to use this product, you're going to need a matte clear coat over it to reduce that shine. And this is almost comparable to Army Painter, but not quite as glossy as the Army Painter finishes. Taking a look at how it filled the, oh, wait a minute here, let's do that, there we go. You can see that it actually produced some of that hollowing in the corners as well, similar to the GW wash, but has a bit more of a concentrated effect where it doesn't quite as evenly distribute itself over the sprue. Here it is unpainted, you know, to give you a comparison, and really collects in those corners much more aggressively. I feel like it's got a, I don't know, it's interesting, it's got a different viscosity than the GW washes and produces, I think, a stronger edged effect. Let's just do that as a side-by-side. Here's the GW sprue. And, well, you know, it's a crisper line, I'd say, in some sense. I have not really been impressed with the Wonder Wash effect, but now seeing it compared to the others on the sprues, I've been a little more soft on it and its potential uses. One thing you can note here is that at the bottom, keep that in focus, is at the bottom of the buttons, it's given a more of a uniform well, I shouldn't say uniform, it's given more of a gradation in the color. It's sagged more than the GW did, for instance, which I think I'm going to use as the standard. So it's produced an interesting sort of gradation across even a flat surface, which might have a nice effect in certain applications. Looking at the Army Painter Strong Tone, now the Army Painter Strong Tone produces, as you can see here, a very high gloss finish. It requires a matte clear coat. They sell a very nice anti-shine. I've done a review on that product in the past. You might want to take a look at it. But the Army Painter gives a really very nice gradation over the surface. And what's interesting is you can see even on the flat surfaces here, you know, it pulls away from the very crisp edge of the sprue and gives a nice center highlight. Well, it's sort of a darkening, an anti-highlight, if you will, in the center, and almost seems to give it some texture even though there's no texture there. The Army Painter also fills the corners much more evenly than either of the first two that I've shown you so far, and also exhibits some of that sag where you get that gradation across the flat surface. It is a very nice effect, I have to say that, even though it is the most expensive of the three, which I'll show you in numbers in a second. But you know, it's one of the other benefits it's going to have is because it is a polyurethane, it's an extremely durable finish, much more so than the others that I've been showing you. So that's something to consider as well. But really, really pretty impressed with how it has shaded the sprue and given some very interesting effects. You know, even along the bottom here, you can see pulled away from the edge and then given a nice even feel across the flat areas. So that's the Army Painter Quick Shade. Strong Tone, I should say. Lastly, we have the Vallejo shade line. Now the Vallejo wash, you know, it comes in a much larger bottle, so miniatures could be dipped directly into it. And when I first applied it, I've used it on my unit of ghouls actually mixed with the sienna, and I diluted it a little bit with water. What I did here is I just applied it straight on at full strength concentration, and it was an overwhelming effect. Much, much heavier amount of pigment in this one than the other three, and really failed to give the kind of shading that I would expect on a miniature. It did pool in some areas. Let's see if I can give you a close-up of that. But it's overpowering. And I realized this is not the effect I got on my miniature, so I went back and I diluted it 50-50 with water, and I applied it a little bit more carefully. And I think here you get a more reasonable look at the effect that it produces. It's got an almost chalky appearance. It is so matte. It's like ultra matte. I could describe it that way. Literally almost chalky, which on some models, like my ghouls, I thought gave a very nice effect. Let me show you one of those. This is not a finished unit. It's just been base painted and then given a wash of a 50-50 with the Vallejo color. And since I just did it, I happen to have one right here for you. But it's really filled in the folds of the clothing very well. It's gotten you know, facial details. Stay in focus now. There we go. Facial details really nicely picked out, and gives them a very dirty look, which I think works very well for undead. I like the effect, but it might not be appropriate on all miniatures, as it is almost a sooty effect, I would say, compared to some of the other much more clean, finer pigmented, I think, of the other three. I think the pigment, you know, content of this is ground a little maybe coarser, or I don't know. It's almost powdery when it dries in appearance. Taking a look at price, between all of these products, I think the numbers will be interesting to you, as what I've done is a little calculation of the cost per milliliter of these products based on their manufactured suggested retail price. So, of course, the price would go down to, say, 20% on all of these, depending on where you bought it, but at least this gives you an idea that's a standard that we can compare their MSRP versus their volume. And let me put that up right now.